changed my life, and then over these years, um, it's changed so many.
Keanu Reeves has always been the quiet one in the room. No scandals, no public meltdowns, no explosive interviews. While Hollywood rewards noise, Keanu chose silence. And that silence made people underestimate how much pain he carried. Long before he became a symbol of kindness, humility, and quiet strength, Keanu learned how to endure loss in ways most people never have to. His life wasn't shaped by one tragedy, but by a pattern of them. Abandonment, death, betrayal, grief, writhing, again and again, never giving him time to fully heal. Each loss stacked quietly on top of the last, forming a weight he never spoke about. Where others turned their pain into headlines, Keanu absorbed his. He learned early that survival didn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looked like showing up. Anyway, saying less, feeling more. What makes his story powerful isn't that he survived these moments. It's that he never let them turn him bitter. While others hardened, Keanu softened. While others demanded attention, he disappeared into his work. Acting became a refuge, a place where emotion could exist without explanation. He didn't chase fame for validation. He used it as shelter. And while the world applauded his success, few noticed what it cost him. The sadness in his eyes, the restraint in his voice, the way he never spoke badly about anyone, even those who hurt him. To understand Keanu Reeves, you have to look past the movies, past the fame, and into the long stretches of silence where he carried pain no one could see. That silence wasn't emptiness, it was endurance. Keanu Reeves was born in Beirut in 1964, a city already trembling on the edge of chaos. But the real rupture in his life came early, when his father walked out. Before Keanu was old enough to understand why, at just 3 years old, he learned his first lesson about disappearance. Someone could be there one day and gone the next, without warning, without explanation. His childhood became a constant cycle of movement, country to country, school to school, never staying long enough to feel safe. By the time he was 10, he had lived in multiple countries and attended more schools than most children ever would in a lifetime. There were no roots, no childhood friends to grow up alongside. Every time he began to settle, life pulled him somewhere else. At school, undiagnosed dyslexia made him feel slow, different, misunderstood. Reading was exhausting. Writing felt impossible. Teachers labeled him lazy. Report cards filled with disappointment. Classmates moved on while he struggled to keep up. Each failure quietly chipped away at his confidence. At home, stability was just as fragile. Father figures came and went through his mother's marriages, reinforcing the same painful truth. Nothing stays. Promises were temporary. Comfort was conditional. Over time, Keanu stopped expecting people to remain. He learned self-reliance not because he wanted to, but because he had to. That emotional distance became armor. It protected him, but it also isolated him, even as he grew older, even as fame arrived. That early lesson never left. Attachment meant risk, and risk, for Keanu, had always ended in loss. Dropping out of school at 17 didn't feel bold. It felt terrifying. While others talked about backup plans and safety nets, Keanu had none. Acting wasn't a childhood fantasy fueled by applause. It was survival, a way out of confusion, a way to belong somewhere. But the industry didn't welcome him gently. Early auditions were brutal. Casting agents didn't critique his performance. They questioned his identity. His name sounded too foreign. His face didn't fit familiar boxes. His quiet presence made people uncomfortable in rooms that preferred loud confidence. For a while, Keanu tried to adapt. He shortened his name. He experimented with aliases. He walked into casting rooms pretending to be someone easier to digest. It worked occasionally, but it hollowed him out. Each fake name felt like a small surrender. Eventually, he stopped. Reclaiming his real name wasn't a career move. It was an emotional line in the sand. If he was going to fail, he would fail honestly. The work that followed was inconsistent and often humiliating. Commercials paid rent, but bruised pride. Theater fed his soul, but emptied his wallet. Early television exposed his rawness. Forgotten lines, stiff delivery, scenes reshot again and again. Critics noticed his flaws before his potential. Self-doubt crept in quietly. There were nights he questioned whether he was wasting his life chasing something he simply wasn't built for. He came dangerously close to quitting. What stopped him wasn't confidence or ambition. It was self-awareness. Keanu didn't believe he was exceptional, but he believed he was sincere, and in an industry obsessed with perfection, that sincerity became his quiet rebellion. Slowly, people noticed, not because he was polished, but because he was real. When Keanu met River Phoenix, the connection was immediate, effortless, unspoken. There was no posturing between them, no competition. In a world where actors measured worth by attention, River and Keanu recognized something deeper in each other: vulnerability. River wasn't just a talented co-star, he was proof that sensitivity had a place in an unforgiving industry. Their bond grew quickly and intensely. Keanu admired River's creativity, his fearlessness, his emotional openness. River, in turn, trusted Keanu in a way few people earned. That trust showed in actions, not words. Keanu once rode across states on a motorcycle just to convince River to take a role, not for fame, not for strategy, but because he believed in him. Loyalty to Keanu was never conditional. When River died suddenly in 1993, the impact was devastating. The world saw headlines. Keanu felt absence, a silence so heavy it changed how he moved through life. He didn't process grief publicly. There were no emotional interviews, no visible breakdowns. Instead, he retreated inward. Friends noticed the shift immediately. His laughter softened. His pauses grew longer. The quiet that once felt thoughtful now felt weighted. This grief didn't explode. It settled. It became something Keanu carried daily. From that moment on, he understood that loving deeply meant risking unbearable loss. But instead of closing himself off, he chose something harder. He kept loving anyway, quietly, fully, without protection. And that choice shaped the man the world would later admire, not for his fame, but for his humanity. By the mid-1990s, Keanu Reeves had what most actors spend a lifetime chasing. Speed exploded globally, turning him into an instant action icon. Studios lined up with sequels, bigger paychecks, louder scripts, and carefully packaged images. On paper, he had arrived. But inside, nothing felt settled. Fame amplified his visibility, not his peace. Critics never fully embraced him. His performance in Bram Stoker's Dracula became a cultural joke, especially his accent. Late-night hosts mocked him. Reviews dismissed him as stiff, wooden, accidental. Hollywood didn't see a craftsman finding his footing. It saw a lucky anomaly, someone who stumbled into success rather than earned it. For many actors, that kind of scrutiny sparks defensiveness. For Keanu, it sparks self-examination. He didn't clap back. He didn't rewrite the narrative. He internalized the criticism and asked himself what he could control. He trained harder, took acting classes quietly, chose unconventional roles that scared him creatively instead of reinforcing his action hero image. He turned down projects that promised easy money but felt empty. Studios noticed, and not kindly. Doors closed. Momentum slowed. Offers disappeared. Walking away cost him favor in an industry built on obedience. But Keanu wasn't chasing approval anymore. He was protecting something fragile: his sense of self. Integrity mattered more than optics. Comfort mattered less than honesty. While others chased relevance, Keanu accepted uncertainty. Fame brought recognition, not fulfillment, and instead of letting it harden him, he let it refine him. Success didn't shield him from pain. It clarified what he was unwilling to sacrifice to escape it. Just as Keanu's career stabilized into something lasting, trust, the one thing he valued most, was quietly violated. He discovered that a contract had been signed in his name without his knowledge. His signature forged, his consent erased. Someone from inside his own circle had made the decision for him, binding him legally to a project he never wanted. The shock wasn't professional, it was personal. This wasn't a faceless studio executive. It was someone he believed understood him, someone he trusted. The betrayal cut deeper because it exploited his kindness, his passivity, his belief that good intentions were enough protection. He could have gone public, filed lawsuits, exposed the deception. Hollywood loves a scandal, and he would have won. Instead, Keanu chose the lonelier path. He honored the contract, showed up, took the criticism when the film failed, absorbed the damage without explanation. Not because he was weak, but because he refused to let bitterness define him. Still, something changed. Not visibly, not dramatically, but internally. A boundary formed. From that moment on, he became more selective, more cautious about access. Trust was no longer automatic. It was earned. He didn't grow cold. He grew deliberate. The lesson was painful but permanent. Kindness without boundaries invites harm. And while the world never heard the full story, the experience reshaped how Keanu navigated fame. Quieter, wiser, and far more careful about who stood close enough to sign his name. When Keanu Reeves found love with Jennifer Syme, it felt like a pause in the storm. For the first time in years, life hinted at something stable, something gentle. They spoke about a future not defined by schedules or premieres, but by ordinary hopes, a home, a child, a family untouched by headlines. For someone who had spent his life absorbing loss quietly, this felt like permission to exhale. Then tragedy returned without warning. Their daughter was stillborn, the kind of loss that steals language, the kind that leaves no proper response. Keanu didn't perform grief. He didn't retreat into work or distraction. He stayed present. Jennifer, however, unraveled under the weight of it. Grief pulled them in different directions, not through anger, but exhaustion. Love survived, but the relationship fractured under the strain. Time passed. Distance softened into reflection. Just as they began to find their way back to each other, fate struck again. Jennifer was killed in a car accident at 28. No warning, no closure, just absence. To unimaginable losses within 2 years, a child and the woman he loved. Most people break loudly. Keanu vanished quietly. He withdrew from the world. Without explanation, there were no statements, no interviews, no attempts to turn pain into narrative. He carried it alone. Friends later spoke of how the silence around him changed. Heavier, slower. His sadness never demanded attention. It simply lived behind his eyes. Grief didn't define his public image, but it reshaped the man completely. And it never left. At the height of his fame, Keanu Reeves made a decision Hollywood couldn't forgive. He turned down Speed 2. Not because of money, not because of ego, but because the story felt wrong. In an industry built on sequels and obedience, that kind of refusal is dangerous. The studio responded swiftly, not with confrontation, but silence. Offers slowed, calls stopped. Keanu was quietly frozen out. The exile lasted 14 years. Keanu didn't protest. He didn't plead for relevance. Instead, he stepped away from the machinery of power and chose something smaller. Theater, independent films, characters that didn't promise box office safety but offered emotional truth. He rebuilt himself away from the spotlight, not as a brand, but as an actor. Then came The Matrix, a script most studios didn't understand, a role others passed on, a concept considered too strange to succeed. Keanu said yes without hesitation, not because it was safe, but because it was bold. The film changed everything. It didn't just resurrect his career, it redefined modern cinema. But success never came without consequence. The sequels confused audiences, expectations turned critical, another wave of disappointment followed, and once again, Keanu absorbed it without defense. No bitterness, no explanations, just endurance. Saying no had cost him power, but it gave him something far rarer, freedom. And he never traded it back. After The Matrix, Hollywood's attention moved on. Almost as if Keanu Reeves had never existed, the offers became scarce. Roles that once seemed tailor-made now went to younger, flashier actors. Critics dismissed him as a relic. Mockery returned like a tide, subtle at first, then relentless. By 50, it seemed the world had decided that Keanu's moment had passed. But life has a way of circling back. John Wick arrived quietly, a modest production. A character with little fanfare, no promise of franchise fame. It was the kind of role few would notice, yet for Keanu, it was perfect. The character demanded precision, control, and a quiet intensity, traits Keanu had honed over decades, forged in loss and discipline. It was as if the role had been waiting for him as much as he had been waiting for it. When audiences first saw him stride onto the screen, they didn't just see a former action star. They saw presence, calm, deadly, controlled. Every movement, every glance was a distillation of years lived in the shadows, both public and private. The pain, the silence, the endurance, the losses, and the betrayals all fed the performance, giving it a weight and authenticity no one else could replicate. John Wick wasn't just a comeback. It was a reflection of a lifetime. The audience didn't merely watch a character. They recognized the man behind it. They saw a survivor who had endured invisibility, humiliation, grief, and exile, yet returned not for revenge, not for glory, but for the work itself. And in that quiet return, Hollywood was reminded that comebacks belong not to the loudest, but to the patient, to those who have lived through everything and returned unchanged in essence, yet infinitely stronger. Keanu Reeves' story isn't defined by box office numbers or awards. It's defined by restraint, by gentleness, by the rare ability to endure betrayal, loss, public ridicule, and isolation without letting it turn him into someone unrecognizable. In a world where pain often becomes weaponized, Keanu chose something harder. He chose not to harden. Through decades of abandonment, grief, career setbacks, and personal tragedies, he remained soft in his humanity. He didn't lash out at studios, gossip columns, or critics. He didn't exploit his pain for sympathy or fame. Instead, he walked quietly through suffering, absorbing it without spectacle, letting it inform the person he wanted to be rather than the persona the world demanded. This is his real legacy. Not the films, not the stunts, not the iconic characters. It is the refusal to let the world's cruelty dictate his nature. It is the choice to remain humble in an industry built on ego and pretense. It is the act of generosity, of decency, when no one is watching. That is why people don't just admire him, they trust him. What appears effortless on screen is earned in the invisible spaces often, in silence, in sorrow, in quiet resilience. Keanu Reeves never became bitter, and in doing so, he achieved something far rarer than fame. He survived without losing himself. In an industry that celebrates noise, spectacle, and revenge, he stands as a quiet anomaly. A reminder that endurance is not about what you conquer, but who you remain while the world tries to break you.